Dom you.
Dom you.
Dom you.
Dom you.
Domination University.
My name is Erin Cadet. I'm a soon-to-be marriage and family therapist with permits, so I'm not officially what we would call LMFT, but it's in the works. It's in the works, and I specialize in working with relationship issues and the LGBTQ plus communities, and I forgot all the letters. And I work, in alternative relationship structures, and that's primarily my focus right now.
What is some advice you could give, or just some wisdom on the issues with relationships and marriage? And because unfortunately, it's such a huge part of our lives, and it's not like we're taught from a young age more about relationships, and I think we should be.
I would say, everybody has a different situation that's going on with them in terms of their relationship. But I feel like, something you to be tried and true, from generation to generation when it comes to building and sustaining relationships. And then there are certain things that, are changing and evolving, and certain things that were once taboo to talk about are now being talked about more openly. But I'm definitely a big believer in a marriage and a relationship being a living, breathing thing. And I think that we, as a Western culture, or living in Western culture, have been so ingrained with these certain ideas about how our relationships are supposed to operate. And, the thing about so many people who are on the fringes of that in terms of exploring non-monogamy and alternative relationship styles, have really begun to question those things. And I think that it's to the benefit of everyone to really start looking at that, and to start, instead of following a certain criterion about how their relationship's supposed to be, start making it go a relationship to relationship and figure out what works for the individuals involved, and then go from there.
Is there particular issues that come up in common relationship problems, like fidelity or money? Do you have any comments that you want to share on either of those from a relationship standpoint?
I still haven't gotten a whole lot about money, but I do most often hear about, fidelity. And I feel like, I'm trying to think if I would say, I feel like perhaps there's a sense of boredom that goes on with people, and just dissatisfaction. One of the things, one of the areas that I would like to specialize in more and more is working with, single individuals, and assumptions about like what a relationship is supposed to be. Like, I find certain things very problematic, or increasingly problematic. One in particular is how we continue to perpetuate this idea of never settling, and how much pressure I feel that puts on a relationship. I would say one of the biggest things that's affecting people now is the idea that their relationship is supposed to fulfill so many needs, that our relationships are collapsing under the pressure of that.
So with boredom, if a couple was to come to you and they're having boredom in the bedroom, or boredom in the relationship in general, is there, other than communication, is there certain advice that you would give them right off the get-go, or areas that you would encourage them to explore on their own?
Well, I feel like something like boredom, one of the issues that, when I talk about relationships as we've been taught to think about them now, is we so like all up in each other's face. Like it's supposed to be, oh, we went out, we had a great time, we really like each other, and then the more your feelings deepen, the more time you want to spend together, then you move in together, then you get engaged, then you get married, then you just all up in each other's face all the time, constantly. It's as if you can't become two separate individuals anymore, because now it's not like, oh, what am I going to get up and do today? It's what are we going to get up and do today? What do you mean you're going out with your friends? I don't like, that's not what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to stay at home and watch Luke Cage or something. And I think that boredom, brought up communication, but I think it's also about um, being willing to differentiate again, and to have separate lives and separate interests, and encourage and support that in one another. Um, and I think that that can be something that can help people to then come back to their relationship renewed. Like, I don't, I think that, from things that people have said to me who are in an open relationship, they're very happily partnered. But opening up the relationship suddenly, kind of renewed a spark in their relationship, a renewed an interest in their partner. It wasn't that they had lacked interest or that there was something wrong in their relationship, but suddenly, it was like you saw them as, oh, okay, so other people are attracted to my partner, or my partner's having a really good time and they're feeling good about themselves. That's very attractive for me to be able to see that. Um, and I just think that, it comes from, you just have to be willing to break up that monotony. I remember reading something once that was talking about, I believe, how enmeshed people can be in relationships. And they had suggested that a partner get up, like they pick a night, like the couple discuss it, but they pick a night, maybe a Tuesday, and then they just get up and they leave, and they don't tell the partner where they're going to go or what they're doing, and they don't call them. And then like they just come back home either the next night or like later on that night. I'm sorry, the next day or later on that night. And like even when I read it, I was like, what? Go somewhere and then not tell your partner where you're going. But it was just the idea of starting to individuate again, starting to like be two separate people again. Because I think that part of that boredom comes is because you feel like, oh, I already know them. There's no surprises here. Because one of the things Esther Perel talks about is we want all this familiarity and then we want this novelty. And I think we have to work on ways that we can start to create that novelty again, whether it's bringing something new into the bedroom, whether it's considering opening up the relationship, whether it's just like going out and then not telling me anything about where you're going. Like they can tell you the next day or they can tell you when they got back, but just like the idea of like, oh, this person is a separate person. I think that that could be really helpful. And people realizing, trying to get a little bit of that back.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, definitely that's great wisdom for any relationship of any form. Do you have any opinions on the Me Too movement right now and the momentum of where that can go? How we can continue to take that energy and transmute female empowerment and females' position in society with, wage gap, as well as, we see all the terrible things that women have gone through just trying to, climb the corporate ladder or the entertainment ladder, and all these situations have been abusive. Do you want to talk about that at all?
Yeah. I find myself so conflicted about it, not because women are coming forth and telling their stories, but because um, a lot of it, there's so many nuances there that it kind of really like, it's like I can't 100%, I'm just not comfortable. And the example I'll use is, with the Me Too movement, part of why it's so powerful is that women are being able to come out of the shadows and talk about a lot of these really inappropriate instances that have happened to them at the hands of these men in power. And that's wonderful and that's exciting. But part of the problem becomes is that, yeah, we have a Me Too movement, but like take, for example, in Hollywood, okay, we're talking about this, but then what happens? I still don't hear anybody talking about policy in here in terms of like making sure that these types of things don't happen again. Because I guarantee you, these aren't the only things that are happening that Hollywood isn't speaking out about. I mean, Corey Feldman is an excellent example who brought up how many children are being molested in the industry. And yet I still don't like where are the safeguards that people are going to implement so that these types of things don't happen again? Or are we just going to continue to talk about it and make a big huff about it? And then like a few years, then it's back to normal. And then the other issues that I'm having are the fact that because women have not been believed for so long, now we have the pendulum swinging from always believing the men, the big, powerful men in charge, to now we always believe the women. And I feel like the problem is that, I'm not saying that the majority of women that are going through these experiences are lying, but I'm talking about the fact that now it's like, all someone has to do is make an allegation, and now it doesn't become just it's not even alleged anymore. Now it's the truth, because we're so used to men lying and women not, and the mainstream not believing them, that now we automatically believe the women, whereas we used to automatically believe the men. And I just like there's something that's wrong for that in me, and I don't know if it's me being a woman of color, in particular a Black woman, where growing up reading my own history, there were so many instances of Black men and Black boys. All it took was a white woman saying that a little Black boy whistled at her and he could be killed. And that's why I was like, there's just something about it that I just find problematic that isn't being talked about in the mainstream society, that I just can't get behind it. Like, I remember when Lena Dunham was talking about I don't know what it's like, it's Odell or something. I can't remember what. I think he's a football player, but she was talking about how he really didn't acknowledge her at the Met Gala, and that he looked at her like she was disgusting. And a lot of Black women came to his defense because he didn't do anything inappropriate to her, but because he didn't have he didn't react to her in the way that she thought he should, that she was offended. And it's just like, it just came across like she was making an allegation towards him. And it's like, there's just too much history there of white women versus Black men and all this type of stuff for, that type of thing to be okay. That's why I feel like, for me, I feel conflicted internally about all of it, even though I'm in full favor of people speaking out about things that have been done wrong to them. And then the last piece is that, where do we go from here? Okay, now we know what Kevin Spacey's been doing. Now we know what Harvey Weinstein has been doing. Now we know how Aziz Ansari messed up one night. But then what do we do after this? Because I see a lot of like, let's ostracize them and push them out. But then are we really going to do that forever? Or is it really just going to be for a couple of years and then they're going to have a resurgence in their career? Or are we going to do that forever? And then what do we learn there? Because these aren't the first men, nor will they be the last who are going to mess up. What are we going to do? How do we combat this? Is there any way to combat this? Is there any way for these people to be reputations to ever be restored? I mean, it's one time you make them, like, and I'm not saying that, because obviously many of them made mistakes over and over and over again, but like, take Chris Brown, for example. Like, how long is, like, so Chris Brown forever is like, oh, he just beats women? Is that what that is? And then, so he never gets to like rectify that mistake? Or is it one mistake and then you're just tainted for the rest of your life?
Yeah, there's definitely a dehumanizing process that could be potentially bottomless, which is unfortunate. And I felt bad in some situations where you looked at this person and they fucked up real badly for like maybe 15 years ago in their life. And I mean, even 5 years ago, I was a different person. 10 years ago seems like an entirely different lifetime. And so it's just the timing. It's unfortunate it's taken so long to get this point. I mean, I'm all about it like you, but there has to be a system of fairness, a system of like quantifying, I guess, the damage a little bit better. And I think, that'll take time. That'll take organization. That'll take rallying. That'll take legislation. That'll take a lot of things. But in the meantime, I think what's a little bit more easy to address is that there's been a lot of situations where women could have controlled a little bit better. Just not to refer to this as being devil's advocate, but just recognizing, for example, with Aziz Ansari, and that was such a polarizing thing, and certainly he messed up and clearly has no game if the account is right. But and I don't think he should lose his career. I don't think he should be demonized to the level that he is. But kind of going to the other side, how can we teach younger women to control their boundaries a little bit better? And I think that's why there's such a age gap issue with the different sides that people take, is that the older women look at that and they're like, really? You didn't see that coming? My mother prepared me for that. I'd be ready to punch him in the face. And I think that's a little bit more, I mean, the angle that I come from with my family background is that I'm ready to come out swinging like at any point in time. But how can we basically inoculate young women's minds to not allow themselves to be the victim of, whether it's just a bad date or just a trashy experience with, a jerk? Or, I mean, obviously you can only do so much when someone's fully, trying to assault you. And unfortunately we have the laws in place. But in the Aziz Ansari situation, how do we take that young woman like Grace and just inoculate her mind like, you defined your boundaries. You strategically position yourself to not to be in a situation where the situation takes over and you have lost your power leverages. Is there maybe a particular angle that we can look at and just trying to help women understand what their boundaries are and to defend those boundaries in a manner that is, in alignment with who they are and how they want to be treated?
Well, I mean, the easy answer would really be let's deconstruct patriarchy and sexism, because with the older women saying like, oh, why does she assert her boundaries and da 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 da? I was like, first of all, why does she have to? Like, I find it so problematic that, in those types of situations, and I've had that internalized misogyny come up inside of me as well. Well, why didn't she leave? Or why did she dress like that? Or why did she drink? But why didn't the man just be like, she seems like she's under the influence. I think I'm just going to let her stay here at the party for the night. Or, gee, she seems like she's under the influence. I don't think we should have sex. Like, why does she always have to be the one to be like, oh, well, let me go and assert my boundaries because, and this happens to women all of the time. And the fact that there's so many women that can come in and say that they've been in a situation where, things were getting hot and heavy, and then they were like, I'm not 100% sure about this, or they had agreed to, oh, he could come over and, it's okay, we can make out, but I already told him before he came over that I don't think I'm comfortable doing anything else. But then still the guy comes over, you make out, and then next thing you know, he's trying to go into full-fledged penetrative sex. Or like in that situation, she came back to his apartment, and then, at some point she realized that she wasn't comfortable. A lot of it isn't that women can be uncomfortable, but because we're so concerned that if we speak up, what the ramifications might be, sometimes we're scared that it might hurt his feelings. And sometimes we're scared that when we really say we're scared we're going to hurt his feelings, we're also really scared that his feelings are going to get hurt and then he's going to react violently. So that's why it's like all of these things going on, because I think it's safe to assume that most women in have American culture anyway have been raised to be like, if no means no, and if you don't feel comfortable, speak up. But because we're also raised, be polite, and men's feelings come first, and if he gets upset, then you don't know if this is going to turn into a whole big huge sexual assault thing. You don't know if he's going to turn violent. You don't know if you're going to end up dead in the Hudson. So you got to be strategic about how you let him down. That's what a bigger issue. If men's egos weren't so fragile, and I'm not saying that all men are like this or like that, but I'm just making a point that women are raised to be very, 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 very careful about how they engage with men, because we don't know when it's going to turn left. And that's the situation where she may not have felt like she knew where this was going to turn left. And so she just didn't say anything. And then she ended up feeling, really upset about it later. So I feel like when we talk about how can we get the young women to assert their boundaries, as first they have to feel safe to assert their boundaries. And they can't feel safe to assert their boundaries unless we start calling men out and calling them up, and not just us, but other men, and start making this not okay for men to behave this way, and for them to start saying, gee, I don't know if I'm reading her correctly in terms of whether or not she wants to proceed with this. Maybe I'll stop and ask. And then if she says no, or she doesn't seem comfortable, because people tend to be able to read body language, they say, you know what, I think I'll just stop. Because if you intend to see them again, then what difference does it going to make if you just stop? And even if you don't intend to see them again, I would rather somebody be 100% consenting than about at 87.
Yeah. And that's certainly the classier way for men to approach that. And I've heard some men that I'm friends with or connected to in some way talk about how men are socialized to make a move, and that if you don't make a move, you're quote unquote a pussy. And I've actually had girlfriends that describe situations where they were disappointed that a man was not aggressive enough. And they've said things like, men like to chase. And, I know many of women who were disappointed in a guy who was so classy that, he was going to sit on the couch with them, maybe put his arm around them, but really not make a move. And then they walked away disappointed. So, unfortunately, you don't see the classy approach as much in Hollywood and other areas, music videos. You don't see this cultural exalting of a classy man who's super sweet, nurturing, is reading body language, and making a move in a way that's completely respectful of the other person. You see the aggressive man, he goes after what he wants, and the world loves him because he's just so bold and whatever shit. But how can we look at that? And then I kind of want to come back to the female socialization after, because it's got to be both. And from my perspective, we can't wait for one or the other. We got to start chipping away at this stuff right now. Do you think it's a paternal thing, a father thing?
I feel like, I completely empathize with what men are going through as well, because so much of this is how they've been socialized to be. And that doesn't mean that's necessarily who they are, but they're trying to live up to these ideas about what masculinity is supposed to be and how they're supposed to interact with women as well. And, I too have heard women say, I wanted him to make a move and he didn't make a move, or he wasn't as aggressive as I would have liked him to be. But I feel like, if we're going to move more towards an egalitarian way of being, if we're going to move more towards interactions with others where it's more respectable and more conscious that, there's another human being in this room, then I think that that's going to require that we should start having a discussion and say, like for men to feel okay to say, can I kiss you? Or, I would really love to have sex, or I would really, is that something that you want to do? Or in the middle of making out, to just check in and say, are you okay? Um, those are the types of things that men can do, to let their partner know. And because we talk so much about being unclear about, body language, but one thing I read, um, was talking about, like for the most part, most women don't like, for example, putting your finger in a man's ass. Like most women are just not going to do that, because a lot of what we've heard is that, oh my God, you don't do that. That my guy might, punch you in the face, or then he might be so uncomfortable because he'll think that, that's gay or something. So, I wouldn't even think to put my finger in a man's ass without discussing it with him first, like explicit discussion. And see, even to look at that, the fact that I can put my finger in his ass without talking to him about it first, that's what I'm talking about when people decide to put their penis in other people. Is, oh, gee, can I do this? Are you okay with this? All right, this is what I'm going to do, so that they can decide if that's what they want to do. And if at any point in time they say, I'm uncomfortable, then you just stop. I don't have a problem doing it. So why is it a problem for men to do it? And that's because men have been raised from a very patriarchal, entitled mindset, and aggressive mindset, that they're coming out into the situation and they're just like, I'm just doing me because this is the way I was raised to think that I'm supposed to be as a man. And then a lot of women are coming at it from a perspective of, oh, well, I'm expecting a man to come at me with a certain level of aggressiveness, and I now expect that. So if he doesn't do that, I have issue. So that's part of like us being able to have conversation, but also us being able to look at what we've been taught.
Yeah. Yeah, the entitlement is huge. And fortunately, I think that part has just shifted already and is continuing to shift. Men are basically realizing the repercussions, despite what level of fairness might be appropriate, and how they come back on social media or whatnot, or maybe you get your career ruined. Do you think it's cynical of me to try to be more of a teach women to protect themselves? You lay down the law, you clearly define your boundaries, and I've been very clear in situations, but unfortunately it's taken situations where I didn't know how to handle it and I was not treated appropriately, and I find myself being like basically taken advantage so quickly. It's amazing how skillful some people can be at just going in after what they want, and alcohol certainly blurs the reaction time of that. And so I've learned the hard way how to strategically position myself in a date, or, moving forward around the bases, if you will. But that's generally more of my focus, is teaching women how to stand up for themselves and to clearly define, whether it's their words or just where they choose to interact with this person, whether they refuse to go back to their house or not, until they're ready, or they have these conversations and they wait. Do you think that's somewhat cynical, and you can be honest with me? Or is there a healthy way to kind of teach women, like, how to protect themselves without waiting for men to get it more?
My thing is that women have been raised from birth to fear men for their own safety and protection. That's what their parents teach them, because that's their means to survival. So women and girls already know, oh, don't dress provocatively, because if you dress provocatively, then he'll get the wrong impression. They already know all of these things. That doesn't mean that they are not human and that they don't get in situations where they went back to somebody's house and then decided that they didn't want to be there anymore, or they started making out and then realized and then felt like, I'm not into progressing on from this. And that's why I feel like, to continue to like, oh, we need to make sure that we train girls and women even more about that. I was like, but where are boys in this? Because boys aren't getting these discussions. They might get a no means no, but that's about all they get. And I feel like, the making sure girls know how to exercise their boundaries. Yeah, I feel like we know how to do that. But how about we make it okay for us to assert those boundaries? And where I feel like, where's the education going to come in there? Because it's like, you're saying, oh, to let the girl know, she doesn't feel comfortable going back to his house, to tell him that she doesn't feel comfortable going back to his house. But what if she does feel comfortable going back to his house? What if she was like, did feel comfortable giving him a blowjob, and then she didn't really want to have penetrative sex, and then he forced himself on her, and she was like, oh, well, that's not what I came here for, and she told him that before she came over, and still maintained that, and he still did it. Does that mean that that's her fault because she didn't assert her boundaries? I'm just saying that we need to do a better job of, we're always raising girls to how to face the world and how to protect themselves against men. And like, even after all these centuries of doing that, we're still seeing the same stuff because women have been taught the same, but men haven't.
Right.
And I'm waiting for somebody to start teaching our men and our boys how they need to conduct themselves and stop coming into places and spaces and just taking whatever they want. And meanwhile, every time a situation like that happens, it's always the girl to blame because she didn't assert her boundaries or she went someplace that she wasn't supposed to go. Why is he doing that? I walk around not raping people on a regular basis, and yet, like, men are still doing whatever they want. Really? I don't just come up when I'm in with a sexual partner. I don't just take and do whatever I want. Like, I don't just, as I use the example of putting my finger in his head, I don't just do that. I talk to him about it first because, I see him as a real human being, not something that I just, assert, just do whatever I want, an object for me to do whatever I want to sexually until I orgasm and then I'm just done with him. Like, no, because I see him as a real person. When are we going to start raising our boys?
I have a couple closing questions I'd like to ask you. Is there anything else that you'd like to tell us about just your thoughts right now on society or relationships or anything else?
I feel like we're going in the right direction. Um, and that excites me. I'd like to see more and more people challenge the status quo. I mean, that could be a blanket term, or challenge the status quo in terms of how they conduct themselves in their relationships, and realizing that each relationship is a case by case thing. So, I was like, no two relationships, are going to be alike. And because we're not the same people that we were in our last relationship, and we're not with the same person, and to, be willing to think outside the box. Your relationships don't have to look how you thought they were going to in order for them to be ultimately fulfilling.
Awesome. Well said. Well, like I said, this podcast is about empowerment, and so there's a lot of self-help stuff there's going to be in different episodes, as well as just basic, the reality of where we're at, the reality of relationships as grounding as they can be. Is there any other advice that you want to give people on being able to be in better alignment with their own needs, sexually, relationship wise, and communicating that in their lives?
I would say, explore, explore, explore. There are so many spaces and places where people have the opportunity to explore things that they may not have thought they would never be into. And I think that, we're living in a time where it really serves us to just, step outside of our comfort zones and, see what works for us. And, sometimes we'll feel like something isn't for us, and it may not be at that moment, but we never know. Like 2 years down the line, we might be open to exploring something again. And I think that we just have to be willing to, when we say know ourselves, be also operate in the knowledge that ourselves are always changing. and to be able to sit with that. I said, you know, who you were 6 months from now, or 6 months ago, may not be who you are today, and being able to just ride the ride. And I think that, you know, that's part of what we can do in our relationships as well, is acknowledge that and admit that sometimes that's threatening for us. But that's part of the being a human.
If you could go back in time and whisper a bit of advice to a younger self, what would you tell yourself back in time?
I would tell myself to not worry about what everybody else is doing, and to figure out your own path, and that your relationships don't have to look like how everybody else's relationships look. And that basically, I was like, that's what I would have told myself. I would have told myself is like, do what you want. What are your needs? And then you go out and you figure out how to get them met. Don't be worrying about how everybody else. Don't worry about whether or not you're able to fit in with everybody else. You just do what works for you, and then you focus on that. And if they don't like it, it doesn't matter, because it's not their life.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Erin. I really appreciate your Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your
Thank you for having me. This is so fun. I feel like I'm on one of the podcasts now. I'm super excited.
Domination University. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.